And for his formal introduction, I'll just, yes, just a second. Cordially welcome all of you to the 10th day and the 30th lecture of the National Interdisciplinary Refresher course, The Quintessential Educator, Challenges and Opportunities in a Changing World, being organized by the IQAC of ARST College in collaboration with the Ministry of Education's PMMNMTT Teaching Learning Center, Ramanujan College, University of Delhi. A warm welcome to all of you. And today is the 10th day, and all of you know that we have had very meaningful and thought-provoking conversations almost on and about every aspect of education. We had sessions on methods, pedagogic practices, trends, new approaches, even scope and prospects of distance online education. Just now we finished a wonderful session with Professor Ravi Narayan Chakrakodi, who had joined us from Bangalore. He's the regional head of Teaching Learning Center over there. And we had a very hands-on training from him on digital education for educators. We have also been talking about competence building and using creativity and innovation, blended learning, virtual labs, online education, flipped classroom, multilingualism, and experiences and collecting experiences and involving emotions and reflection, conceptualization, technology, and so on and so forth. So in continuation with the ongoing deliberations, we are truly honored to have amidst us Professor Raj Kumar, who has a wide experience, who has vast experience in the field of teaching learning, and he's going to talk about a very important subject which has become an international buzzword, basically inclusive pedagogical practices. Now, with NEP, we are, quite interestingly, our speaker finished his presentation with the statement that education should not lead to marginalization. So if education is all about empowerment and creating opportunities for all, so we have to see how pedagogical practices can enable people from different age groups, gender, ethnicity, caste, class, abilities, and attainment and inclinations, and to understand the obstacles, challenges, and prospects of inclusive pedagogical practices. I'm going to invite Professor Raj Kumar, sir. But before that, our Honorable Principal, Professor Gyantosh Kumar Jhaji, is going to formally welcome Professor Raj Kumar. Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Pleasure and great honor to welcome Professor Raj Kumar in this refresher course. And I am very glad that he has given his valuable time to deliver his lecture on very important topic, inclusive pedagogical practices, examples from the classroom. And I hope that this session is going to be very interesting. जब मैं बोलना शुरू करता हूँ सुबह
some connectivity issue at your end. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
I think this session is going to be very interesting because when a professor like Professor Raj Kumar will talk regarding experience. Hello.
Sir, we can hear you. There is some connectivity issue, but we can hear you. We can still hear you.
Okay. At last, I welcome Professor Raj Kumar. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Professor Gyantosh. So, select Subha or if there
is... Let me read out your bio note first.
Thank you, sir, for giving us your time and for coming here and to deliver your lecture. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Jha.
Sir, it is the most awaited session of this refresher course, and I have the honor to read out your bio note. Professor Raj Kumar is professor and head in the Department of English, University of Delhi. His research areas include autobiographical studies, Dalit literature, Indian writing in English, Odia literature, and post-colonial studies. He has been a fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla in 1999, and has published in journals such as Social Action, Satirtha Bulletin, The Fourth World, Creative Forum, Language Forum, Jadavpur Journal of Comparative Literature, Indian Literature, Social Scientist, Journal of the School of Language, Literature and Culture Studies, International Journal of Communication, Rama Devi Women University Journal of Social Sciences and Humanities, International Journal of Religious Tourism and Pilgrimage, Ravenshaw Journal of Literary and Cultural Studies, Economic and Political Weekly, and Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences. Sir has also translated literary texts from Indian languages, especially Odia, into English. His book, Dalit Personal Narratives, Reading Caste, Nation and Identity, has been published by Orient Black Swan, New Delhi in 2010, and it got reprinted in 2011, 2015, and 2017. His English translation of Akhila Nayak's Bheda, the first Odia Dalit novel, is published by Oxford University Press, Delhi in 2017. His book, Dalit Literature and Criticism, is published by Orient Black Swan, New Delhi in 2019. On behalf of all the participants of this RC and the organizing committee and ARSD family as a whole, I welcome Professor Raj Kumar, sir, and I request him to share his words of wisdom with us. Over to you, sir.
Dr. Subha, that good afternoon to everyone. I believe that, that participant must be tired because today is 10th day and 30th lecture, that is what, that Dr. Subha told, and 3:30 to 5. So please bear with me because for next 1 hour or so, I will, bore you with some of the examples that I'll be giving from my own experiences, but nevertheless, I'll also try to theorize. So first of all, I thank Professor Gyantosh Jha, the principal, and his team, of course, particularly Dr. Subha Dwivedi, for inviting me for this important deliberation. I think it is very important because we are at the threshold of new education policy, almost knocking at the door. And that's why, that the very important title as this refresher course has been given, the quintessential educator, challenges and opportunity in the changing world. And that's why, that we must try to deliberate on the changes. It is, of course, difficult to document all the changes maybe within the time span of the refresher courses. But I'm sure, that different speakers must have touched upon some of the very important areas Dr. Subha has already pointed out. Now, change is inevitable. That is what, that I want to emphasize. Without any change, so we had, say, the several educational policy, and accordingly, we are trying to cope with either as educators or teachers or students, because, that change is must for any society to evolve over the years. Without any change, that survival is not possible. So in order to survive, we must try to change ourselves. So also our pedagogy, that. So keeping this thing in mind, as you have been, that already notified, the title of my lecture is Inclusive Pedagogical Practices, Examples from the Classroom. Now, that I want to talk about inclusive pedagogical practices because of 2-3 reasons. One, education throughout the world. It is not just in Indian context, but I'll just give some of the examples from India. But to tell you frankly, education in general, if you go to any part of the world, education was never inclusive earlier time. Not today, of course, that we have actually move from maybe, that what is called exclusive society to inclusive. And this is not just in the case of India, but also any part of the world, say England, America, that you talk about any European country. education was only, that meant for certain, maybe, the class of people. So today, of course, that we almost all countries that we are proud of being democratic, progressive, liberal, that etc. etc. Education has been made what is called inclusive, but whether that there is also a question whether we are really inclusive is the question to be further deliberated on. So in my lecture, what I want to do is I will ask several questions, that instead of answering all these questions, maybe you have to bear with me that maybe, that I raise several questions, theoretical, philosophical, as well as practical questions. So some of the questions that I would like to raise, because my experience of being a teacher, educator, or I say actually I'm not a teacher but facilitator. I always try to emphasize upon this because that the term teacher has to be again redefined. So I'm basically a facilitator, and my 2.5 decades of experience of being a facilitator has prompted me to ask several questions, and this is perhaps an opportunity to share with you all. So some of the questions that I would try to raise in my lecture, uh, what is the meaning of education? What exactly is the role of a teacher? How does one cope with the changing circumstances? Because now e-class and e-learnings are becoming new normal, both in teaching and learning practices. And so what could be the inclusive pedagogy, if at all, that we talk about inclusive? So these are some of the questions that I would try to address in my lecture. But as I have already told you, I will raise more questions than answering them. So please bear with me. Let me begin with the idea of, that of course, I'm sure many of you have read a lot about education. So, that please, that excuse me if I try to repeat some of the things that you have either already heard or you have learned. Uh, there are very many, that definition you must have come across, the idea of education. I will just give you, that few, maybe, that 4 or 5, not so much on definition, but what, that people, those who are, that those who are, not where, but those who are very much, that concerned about the role of education over the years, they have emphasized on certain, the basic characteristic of education. I want to, just remind you, the British philosopher Bertrand Russell. I'm sure you know that many of you have read his book. Uh, that so he emphasizes on the idea of education. That having been three tiers. Three tiers. That he talks about information. So that if we collect information, that becomes knowledge, and once knowledge is being practiced, that becomes wisdom. So three types of education, that. So education has, that finally he has a book called Sanity and Wisdom, whereby he emphasizes that education will finally bring sanity. And this is very important, that because we are mad, that almost all of us, we are rushing through madness. And Foucault, that madness and civilization, that I'm reminded of. I'm sorry that I'll be speaking in English from the very beginning. Actually, Professor Gyantos told me that you can speak in Hindi also, bilingual. I'm very poor in Hindi, so my English will be simple. So hope that the participants would be able to follow me. If there are any problems or question, immediately you can ask me, so that I'll be happy to answer. You can ask me hundreds of questions because that my lecture is going to be only that a kind of interactive, dialogical what I talk about. So Bertrand Russell talks about the role of education to bring sanity among mankind. It is not just that the teacher only he emphasizes, but mankind, sanity and wisdom. Now, wisdom, if you remember, in Indian context also, wisdom is what, that the practices of educational knowledge is meant for. So he talks about both, that practical as well as theoretical, that so that if we are, say, sane people, then it is possible to bring a peaceful, that world. The second person I'm reminded, and I'm very big fan of this person, is called Paulo Freire, a Brazilian philosopher whose first book is called Pedagogical Approaches, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. This title of the book, the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is very interesting because he's a Brazilian philosopher who brings lots of field experiences, particularly knowledge of the farmer, yeah, including traditional knowledge of the farmers in Brazil. And he talks about that education has, that basically two important functions. He in fact talks about, that say school and university education as what he talks about, if I can quote him, banking knowledge, that banking knowledge. So again, that Bertrand Russell is being echo here. Banking knowledge, like why does he use the word bank? Because the more money you keep in the bank, the more you can withdraw. So if you have more knowledge, that it is possible that you can survive in this otherwise difficult world. Because he gives the example of farmers, that having traditional knowledge, and he asks question that how does a farmer survive during drought and famine? That sometimes famine would, that make the farmer not only, that homeless, that hopeless as well. So how does one survive, that from all these natural calamities? So he talks about that it is only through knowledge that one can survive. Now, so he talks about banking knowledge. I should not, that give too much lecture here, but he emphasizes on two things, that education for him immediately will give a certificate and job. That is the first thing, that. So education would definitely give us a cushy job, a job that will guarantee us to get some money for our luxurious living. But that is not what he meant for education, because he emphasizes on the second, that education would bring transformation. How? That he talks about how knowledge to be transferred into, say, every idea that we receive from, whether it is school or, that university education has to be practiced. So he talks about praxis, ideas to be praxis. Yeah. So he is the first person to use this word praxis, which means to be practiced. So education is meaningless unless and until the ideas are turned into action. So action-oriented, that education. So that's why I suggested that Paulo Freire finally emphasizes on transformation of society by using, that education that we have gained for, and that is perhaps the real, that challenge. The third, that theorist is Ivan Illich. I don't know how many of you have heard about or read, and he has a very path-breaking book. I'm really fascinated to quote him, called deschooling. No, deschooling. This deschooling is very important because that what he talks about is education is that not for knowing everything, but it is on learning. I must try to emphasize. Deschooling is to unlearn oneself. That we many of us, that we read a lot, and we are proud of being, that knowledgeable person. No? So Ivan Illich talks about, that not meaning how much we know, not that, that we know much, not how much we know, but what we do not know. So it is a kind of relative term. No, his book Deschooling emphasizes not on knowing, but what we do not know. So that it is a real, perhaps that challenge, that how much we do not know in this world. So Deschooling is, that is a path-breaking book, whereby it reminds us to be, that we have to be humble, no, because that the world is very big, complex, and how much we know, that many of the things that we don't know. I'm sure that we need to live for several years to know about the world. To know the world is, that impossible, correct? The last, of course, that I will not go very far, but, that conclude the first part, that the role of education, as Dr. Subha has already emphasized, I also believe, that education is empowerment. So, say Dr. B.R. Ambedkar emphasizes education will bring emancipation, freedom from bondages, freedom from slavery. So the critical consciousness that Paulo Freire talks about, actually, that Paulo Freire has also another book called Critical Consciousness. His first book is called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and the last book is called Critical Consciousness, whereby Ambedkar echoes, that people like Paulo Freire talking about how education has to bring critical consciousness among us, so that we try to fight from all kinds of slavery or bondages. Yeah. So, that finally, that, so this is the first part, whereby, that first question, what is the, maybe, that meaning of education, whereby we must try to emphasize here that education is not just for the betterment of an individual. Of course, that education has given me a certificate or a degree and then a job, but that is not the only, that limiting factor. I have got, that several opportunity from, say, my society, my community, my people, my, the teachers. So what is the next, the thing is that whether it is possible for me to contribute whatever suppose I can for the betterment of society. So that the idea of giving back, the idea of that returning something to my community or my society or my people is perhaps what that is very that cornerstone of the idea of education. So it is not just individual, that you get a job, you get fat salary, you enjoy your life, and that is that is the end of it. No. So education has also another, that critical factor, whereby whether by being educated we can pay something back to our society. So this is the first, that thing that I just wanted to emphasize. Now, the second thing, that is in the Indian context, of course, let's see, because I was talking about the world whereby education was not inclusive, that you talk about America or England, that say in England, which is called the mother of democracy, education was not available to women at the beginning of maybe 19th century. Hope, that those who are student of literature would know about, say, Jane Eyre and there are many others. They could not go to school; they had to study at home and then write novels. So also in India, but in Indian context, that it becomes a religious. So while talking about the societal approach to education, I will give the examples from India, whereby Indian society was not so inclusive. Thanks for, of course, that Indian Constitution post 1950, after India got independence. Now we all know that compulsory education till the age of 14 is there, whereby that uh, every perhaps that person can go to school. This is compulsory, and of course our data shows the recent, that 2011 maybe, that we are 76% literate. which I doubt, of course, that because government definition of literate is, that hope you know about 3R, reading, writing, and that putting a signature. My mother, that was illiterate, and we taught her how to put a signature because that we had to send some money from Delhi to that back home, and she could only write her two alphabets, just to draw. But you cannot say that she was literate. That what I will try to bring, that here is that education for many years, that several years before independence or before the Indian Constitution was enacted in 1950, education was never inclusive in India because that India is basically that a caste society, and that's why you might know about that we have Dharma Shastra 220 or more Dharma Shastra like Manu Shastra, Artha Shastra, Kama Shastra, and many others. That these are all law books, by the way, which prohibited, say, Indian society basically, that is caste society, and that's why earlier in the ancient times, say think about ancient and medieval time, only upper caste men, not even women. Women were, of course, that few examples are given, like, that Garge Maitri, that few, that women are being given as an example that how they were highly educated in Sanskrit, but these are very, that very negligible example because for very long education could not populate it, could not populate down to the that masses because of religious reason, and Dharma Shastra is responsible, as I have already told you. And there were 220 or more Dharma Shastra, and the most that important Dharma Shastra so far, that the so prohibitions are concerned. Say Manu Shastra or Manu Samhita would prohibit Shudra, Ati Shudra, and women not to read and write because Sanskrit was the dominant language, and Sanskrit was considered to be what is called Deva Bhasha, the language of God. Yeah, and that prohibition was so many, that if I can give example, one example maybe that say lower caste and women of any community for that matter, they would not read and write in Sanskrit. So if you read, say, Vijnanam Shakuntalam by Kalidas, say, that, because I'm just giving you example from my own, maybe, the understanding and experience and maybe my research. Women characters in ancient, say, texts like Vijnanam Shakuntalam, that by Kalidas, so they speak not in Sanskrit, but in Prakrit. The low caste, say, man, there is a fisherman who is being caught because he got, that the ring of the king. So fishermen would speak in Prakrit. It is another matter that, that we as students of English literature, we always read in English translation. So we would not know about the difference between Prakrit and Sanskrit. But I must tell you that Sanskrit as a language of God would not be allowed to be read by, say, that low caste and women. As that as an example, that what had happened, heavy punishments were given if the rules are being violated. Say, the first and foremost example that I can give you is from Mahabharata, Ekalavya. Ekalavya wanted, Drona, who is a Brahmin teacher, to be his guru, but then, that he was immediately rejected, being, that he's a tribal boy, of course, and tribal and, the Dalit are being equated. They're together, that's auspicious, untouchable. Yeah? So education was untouchable, actually, that not to be touched. In that sense, untouchable. Ekalavya was heavily punished, hope you know, because that he made a statue of Guru Drona. He learned so much so that he could be a rivalry no, to rival to Arjuna. He could, that be, that he could surpass Arjun's, the talent. He was a, that very talented archer, about. As a result, what has happened? No, look at, the story. I will not, that tell you the story, but in the process, Ekalavya had to lose his thumb. Thumb is an, that thumb is, of course, there are two meanings of the thumb. One is, that thumb is so powerful that, that he could win over any competition, either with Arjun. So he must, that give as a gift to his Brahmin teacher. But if it is a, the symbol and metaphor, if you can try to interpret that Drona, that wanted Ekalavya and his people permanently to be disabled. Yeah, the idea of disability. So, Dalit women and tribals, particularly in ancient and medieval time, they could not be educated. What happened to women constituency in India? No, I'll just give you one example, maybe not, there are very many examples, but then, that the first Indian woman to have written autobiography is called Rasa Sundari Devi, that I'm sure many of you have read about and heard about. She writes her autobiography. She's the first Indian woman to write her autobiography called Amar Jivan, My Life, which got published in 1860. 1860, please, that this year is very important because this is the first Indian woman's autobiography. Never before a woman in India made an attempt to write an autobiography because education was not available to women. Here, time may not permit me because I have to speak for an hour. And Shubha, you have to remind me time because that sometimes I may lose track of it because I have so much to speak. That, so I must limit myself. That Rasa Sundari Devi was not allowed to read and write. Yeah, she tells us that out of 24 hours, 8 hours she used to spend in kitchen. And that she started writing alphabet on the wall of the, that kitchen, which was black, that. She was a self-taught woman. And lo and behold, that she could produce the first Indian woman's autobiography in 1860. 1860s, towards the fag end of 19th century. So education was never allowed, that either for women of all community, Dalits, and of course tribal. Till maybe, that mid 19th century, thanks for British coming to India. And, that I recollect, that some of the measures taken by British, particularly along with the British administrator came Christian missionaries. And I must narrate you one or two events here because never before we, that know about this history. Many of you must have heard about Jyotiva Phule, not Jyotiva. I don't use the word Jyotiva, but Jyotiva. Y has to be caught from Jyotiva, right? Because many people do not know Jyotiva is Sanskritic and that's why Brahminic. Jyotiva Phule. So he was the first person in India to have opened up a school for untouchable boys and girls way back in 1854. Look at, that 1854, because never before, that a school was available publicly, I'm talking about, for untouchable boys and girls. And his wife called Savitri Bai, who was of course illiterate earlier, but Jyotiva, that taught her. And today, that September 5, that we are going to celebrate called Teacher's Day on the name of maybe, that Radhakrishnan. But Dalit activists, they try to celebrate, that Savitri Bai as the first modern Indian teacher, that she is not just a woman teacher, first Indian modern teacher. Because what happened, that there is a fascinating essay by Muktabai. Muktabai happens to be a disciple of Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai Phule, who has written 1.5 page of essay called, the life of Mahar and Man. This is an essay available in English translation in Sujit Haru and K. Lalita's, two volumes book published by Oxford University Press called Indian Women's Writing. No, Women's Writing in India, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 2, you will find this. So, that what I want to tell you is that let's, that understand the trajectory in India. That when Britishers came, of course, many changes happened, but education was not given emphasis till anti-caste intellectuals, like I'll give you a few names. Phule was the first Indian, reformer to emphasize on education for low caste and women. Phule was the first person. Never before anyone could, emphasize the role of education among the masses. Of course, there was Indian Renaissance. That is very interesting. That Indian Renaissance or Indian Reformation movement started by, Raja Ram Mohan Roy. And then there are many stalwarts you might know about Indian reformers called Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Gokhale, Tilak, Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and many others. But look at their, reform. What did they do? So I try, very shortly or briefly, if I can emphasize here, that beginning from Raja Ram Mohan Roy to Gandhi, if you try to, see about their reformation, project, they targeted women, particularly Hindu, women, Hindu household, because they thought that by reforming women, they would also try to reform Indian society as a whole. So, says ban on sati, ban on child marriage, widow remarriage. No, these are some of the things that one after another try to emphasize. But that look at their reformation movement. None of them would emphasize on education. It is only after Phule came to the public, that Phule also started what is called Satya Sodhak Samaj, truth-seeking society. Yeah, if I can translate into English. And he emphasized what is truth about Indian societies, caste is nothing but slavery. As I have already emphasized, that it is only through education that this slavery would be abolished. So he wrote a book called Gulamgiri. The title of this book could be translated into English as Slavery, which was dedicated to the people of America. He dedicated in English, even though he wrote in Marathi originally. He dedicated this book in English, praising American people who had abolished slavery. So I will not, I should move further. It will take a whole lot of time. So it is Phule who began the whole idea of, that emphasizing on education for masses, the people, lower caste people. So Phule used the word Shudra Ati Shudra, for that matter, against Bharji and Shetji, that. So of course, Ambedkar took it forward. I have already, that emphasized idea of Ambedkar. Ambedkar was highest educated person in India then. No, MA, MPhil, delete, PhD, bar at law, whatnot. And Ambedkar, this Ambedkar's personal library. I just always, that try to emphasize everywhere, that by the time he passed away in 1956, his was the highest number of books, the 50,000, that one person having 50,000 in 1956. Not that he was rich, he borrowed money, that by the time he passed away, he had 2 lakhs rupees to, that he has to return to lakh rupees. But then, that you would always, that love to read books and write. The 26 volumes of his writings now are published in English. So after Ambedkar, of course, I'll just give you some names, because that if you have question, I'll be happy to answer. But I'll just give you some names who were responsible for that trying to bring education among low caste women, and of course marginalized people like Dalit and tribal. So it could be Periyar, Narayan Guru. I don't know whether you have heard about all these things. Periyar from Tamil Nadu, Narayana Guru from Kerala, Manguram in Punjab, Achyutanand from Uttar Pradesh, Harichand Thakur in Bengal, Bhima Bhoi in Odisha, and there are many others. So I call these people as anti-caste intellectuals. I in fact run an MPhil course about all these, the people who made it a point that it is only through education that people would get emancipated. So, that is where, that our entry point is Indian constitution, as I already, that emphasized, and it is post, the independent and Indian constitution 1950s, when we started enacting that education has been made compulsory, as I have already emphasized. But even today, look at the, that percentage of, say, there are 3 constituencies I will emphasize. I'm sure that there are many more constituencies, but women particularly, women in Dalit, tribal, and Muslim communities are lagging behind as compared to that they are men. So we have to be that really concerned about the number of literate, particularly that, because unless until there is gender parity, that education has no value. As we all know that education is for the greater good for the society. Now, that I must try to warn here that reports are coming from the field. I'm really, that I have to give you a few examples, so that where are we located so far as education is concerned, because we are all educators. That school education is declining over the years, not because of Corona, by the way, that for last 1.5 years, of course, we all know, that we have children at home, and that how education has that decline over the, particularly for last 2 years maybe. But even before that Corona, there were reports from the field that say standard 6th and 7th student in many parts of India, it is not just that one part, cannot read and write the basic book that mean for primary level. Yeah, this is a that it was experimented, that probe was made. Say this is one that irony so far as education in India, because while that school education is declining over the years, Government of India, as we all know, is emphasizing on higher education, because the target is hope about 30%. That enrollment in higher education, hope the for next 5 or 10 years. So we are perhaps that trying to make up 21% maybe that so far as higher education is concerned, but the target of Indian government is 30%, so that that we can try to bring a kind of that transformation at that at par with maybe that other country. Now, that as a teacher, as we are moving, these are some of the dichotomies I'm talking about. As we are moving, that ahead with, say, as I told you, new education policy, etc., etc., there are also other things, because I am as a teacher or facilitator, I'm concerned with, that, say, if you are a teacher, particularly in higher educational institution like, say, university, I'm bothered actually about the state of several things. So one example I'm giving, all of a sudden, that we know, that the changes coming. Say, Earlier, we had only, that 15% scheduled caste students and 7.5. So, that 91, 92, when Mandal Commission, that was enacted, 27% reservation. So now in our classroom, what we find, 50%, that people, those who come from what is called, that marginalized section. So as a teacher, I have to bother actually about my pedagogical approaches. This is where, that our concern should be, because many of them, they happen to be the first generation of learners. Maybe, that when we move ahead, maybe 21st century, second generation, that, but you may not, that believe that I'm the first generation of learner. No, my parents were illiterate. So I have come to a level only through my hard work. Yeah, nothing. So you can, that imagine that the first generation of learners, when they come to a university like Delhi, for example, because earlier Delhi University, JNU, and that many top university we call, because that this idea of ranking also matters a lot. That both in India and as well as the world ranking. So, so what would be my pedagogical approach is, that now, now there is a new 10% entrant. Hope that economically weaker section. Economically weaker section, so now almost 60% of our students who are sitting in our classroom happen to be, the considerably, I'm talking about the marginalized, the backward, the underprivileged, that. What could be my approach? Say, so I'll just give you maybe, that my classroom, that experiences. So what I do generally as a teacher, as I have already, that emphasized that I'm not just a teacher, but I'm a facilitator. That I'm a facilitator. There is a difference between teacher and facilitator, because that teacher might, that be proud to be teaching. Yeah, teaching. That you teach so that the other learns. But I always try to, that emphasize the idea of facilitating, because our students, irrespective of maybe, that their, say, background, say, a poor person might have come from a rural area, but what Paulo Freire talks about, that the traditional knowledge they have to be, that reused, reinvented, discovered. So while teaching, that in my class, my classes are always interactive, and the interaction goes to the mode of dialogue. I always emphasize on the dialogue making. Why dialogue? That we all know, that from ancient time, that the way Plato and Aristotle, that both student and teacher, they are say, that dialogues are very important, because one has to ask question, the other not necessarily to answer the question, but that further ask the question through which that you will get answer. No, what is very important about making a dialogue is that it is not monologue. The dialogue is opposite to monologue, because sometimes there are teachers who come, teach and go. Just giving a lecture, that will not work. Yeah. What is very important is that you must first try to, that fathom, that the idea of who are going to listen to, how, and, that how long. We are also, that as a very conscientious teacher, we should try also to learn body language of our, the students, whether they are interested, because sometimes I may give a big lecture preparing, that lot many books, but sometimes it goes out of their mind or head, maybe, that. So what is very important is, instead of one way making, that lecture, it is always better that we make dialogue. No, Plato, Aristotle style. whereby, that one question will further, that bring another question, so that, we go on building our, that curiosity. The idea of, the curiosity is very, that important for a teacher or educator, because unless and until students are curious to know, they would not learn. No? If suppose, that they are not interested, say we go to a cinema hall, and sometimes we remember a dialogue or maybe, the few lines from a song, but the rest we don't remember. Why do we remember few lines? Because it touches our heart. The idea of, the touching our heart. So I'm talking about not the mechanical, that way of teaching. Say I teach for 45 minutes or 50 minutes, so that is the end of it. No, of course, we have to, that work in a system, because the timetable is meant, say, if, that we are talking about a college, there are too many, the subject one has to think about. And your timetable is meant that, that you teach only for 45 minutes or 50 minutes and then you have to leave. That is not perhaps, that real education. No, education has to stay in mind for long. So the idea of curiosity, interest, and then, that the idea of a facilitator is to ask the student to think. This is very important. Yeah. This idea of thinking is not a tailor-made product, that what. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is, that if you, that have dialogue, it is basically, that dialogue has to be made so that, that further ideas would evolve. Yeah, evolving ideas. But if, that you have monologue, say one way, that lecture, then that is the end of it. There is no way, that the student will have curiosity. That is a finished product, that you make note of it and then go and deliver. So what I'm, that trying to emphasize here is, that we have to produce among students, if at all, that we are really bothered to impart what is called, that certain interest in education, just to think. I make my student to think. I always tell that I don't know, everything, but I think this might be, that this is the way, because everyone has definitely a brilliant mind. It is a matter of perhaps, that time and of course space. Given the time and space, our students are so brilliant. I always, that learn from them. I tell them that I don't know everything. So it is a kind of, that collective efforts that we can try to build up an ideas. And that's why this idea of thinking is very important. As I will remind you, Descartes, you must have heard about, that I think, therefore I am. No? Idea of Descartes is, that I think, therefore I am. So if we can produce a kind of moment whereby people can think, a student can think, that will go a long way. Now, that I come to the conclusion because, that it is almost 4:30 and there should be some half an hour, for discussion. So my conclusion is a little maybe, that it is unfortunate that we are moving from what is called a kind of value learning, no? The idea of value learning, we try to experiment over with new education policy emphasizing, of course, certain good things, interdisciplinary, that learning in one's language. But we all know that how education is becoming, the business, commercialized more and more. I don't think, that education is, that value-based now, because it matters how many degrees, diploma, and certificate you have, so that you could be awarded suitably for a better job. And that's where the idea of diploma and degree and certificate in, say, if we are going to have 4 years FIUP from 3 years, then there are exit points. Why this exit point? Why can't we make, that a person to climb to the radar of say 4 years complete education, so that the person after finishing 4 years would return as educated. No, that is what that I. So this that exit point would make many dropouts. I must tell you. Yeah, this is my the apprehension. So the first point that I just wanted to that make as a matter of conclusion is that now education is becoming commercialized and privatized. Look at that the private colleges and university coming now. Because government is also actually abdicating. I can use the word abdicating responsibility, because it is giving too much emphasis on privatization. That. So now what will happen? The constituency that I talk about, yeah, SC, ST, OBC, minority, they will be at loss, because they will be the one who would not be able to compete in the that competitive world, because it is now going to be market friendly. That when we talk about commerce, so education, what I emphasize at the very beginning, the ideal, that the ideals of education to make everyone, that an enable being. No, if I can emphasize, that what I quoted from Russell and Paulo Freire and Ivan Illich and Ambedkar, that the idealism that we talk about, ideals and idealism. Of course, I'm, that trying to emphasize both the term, that is going to be lost, because, that in market, everything has to be compromised, because you have to, as a teacher or educator, you have to sell your product, which is also called finished product. Say, that as an English teacher, what, what I'll be doing, see, that my faculty is called arts, faculty of arts. Now look at the art, that we have 64 different, kinds of art in Indian context. Yeah. So education is an art, and it is also called humanities, no? Center for Humanities. Now this idea of humanity is getting, that lost. There is no humanity anymore, because, when there is competitive market, when there is cutthroat market, cutthroat competition, perhaps the idea of humanity is not there. So what I was talking to you, when I want to be a facilitator in a classroom, asking the student to think critically, that is not be possible now, because they have to buy a product. No, they will pay price, and they have every right to buy a product that is going to be useful for them. And when I'm using the word useful, it is material. What Paulo Freire talks about, one is material, another is moral. To be critically conscious is moral. Yeah, but to get a job, to live a luxurious life is material. Now we are going to lose the ideals of education more and more by selling the finished product. So I will be asked to sell, for example, let's say Dr. Subha will be asked to perhaps prepare a course called Diploma in Business Communication or Business English, or fluency in English, or commerce. That commerce student will teach what is called it could
Marketing.
be business English. Anything, it could be anything. Whereby, that I don't know how much we will be able to bring, that the idea of idealism, but then, that we are going to sell the finished product. So there is no dialogue. There is only monologue. So I'm afraid of. So with this, that word, I must caution you, because you all are teachers, I can see 127, the number, that including me. This is where, that I'm afraid of, that I'm definitely afraid of two things, that one is our role as an educator is going to be, the change drastically. No, that is one. And number two, if this is so, then what will happen to those constituency? I have already emphasized, that people, those who are trying to come to the center, no, because from margin to the center, because education would have given them, that some hope to, that be better. They are going to lose their dream, their aspiration, their hope. So I'm so sorry, that to bring this end with little maybe, that hopelessness, but I'm sure, that we can make some dialogues, some interaction. I'm just, that giving you some questions. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, sir, for this really, really illuminating and enriching session. And in fact, you made it all the more worth listening with your personal examples. And I have to tell you this, that I'm in awe of your personality, sir. And I mean, the way you have talked about your childhood and your struggle, I mean, that's a kind of an inspiration for all of us, Although all of us go through some kind of a struggle, and being from teaching community, I think struggles are more, and there are many more, staring us in our face. So it's just that your presentation was extremely relevant. Your ideas were extremely relevant to us, and as teaching community, belonging to the teaching community, we have realized that we too are, constantly dealing with these issues. And I particularly liked your systematic approach, the way you described and explained and built up this whole discourse on qualitative education, holistic education, I should say. We should create opportunity for all, and we should accommodate all students belonging, irrespective of different communities and class and abilities and various requirements also. So your description, your whole treatment of the subject was very relevant to us, because you also gave us a historical view of the various educators, though they might not have been formal educators, as teachers having degrees and qualifications, but they were the best teachers, as they were the social reformers. They brought change in the society, starting from Raja Rammohan Roy and many others. And also you gave relevant examples from the history, where women came out and came out of their exploitative background and discriminatory background, and took up to writing and created systematic works. So those examples were extremely interesting and relevant, and also inspiring to us. And we are seeing that there are larger threats coming up in front of us, in front of the educators, as we can see that there is a shift. Although in principle we are talking about values in education and character building and all sort of things, but we know that there is a greater shift towards market needs, and the market, the commercialization and the psychological, social, moral, and aesthetic considerations have taken a back seat. So all of that is really relevant to us, because we have to see that the society has to see that a balance has to be created between different kinds of needs, and educators need to be such persons who can look into the different needs of learners. They can't just provide the subject knowledge and all of that. And from this, I'm just moving to the questions, because I can see there's a lot of enthusiasm in our participants, and they have shared few observations. There's this participant, very enthusiastic participant, Mr. Gopal Kumar, and he would like to know, should I read out the questions in Hindi or in English, sir? What would you prefer?
Yeah, Hindi will, I'll understand.
Yeah, because this is a bilingual refresher course. So,
please go ahead. If I don't understand, I'll ask you.
Yeah. So basically, there's this one general question that आप रामायण महाभारत आदि ग्रंथों को साहित्य मानते हैं या इतिहास की पुस्तकें?
Yeah, this is Sahitya mante hain, because that they are never that history, even though it is said that Mahabharata is Itihasa, but Mahabharata is also Purana. It is considered to be, say, two epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and of course we have 18 Puranas, 4 Vedas, and several Upanishads. All these are, that never been considered as history, because history if I, I have read a lot about the theoretical consideration of what is history. Say E.H. Carr, there is a small book, What is History? If you read, you will come to know about that history is a very different subject altogether. Even though we call Mahabharata as Itihasa, but it is in a very different context because historically certain, maybe, the references to either place, event, maybe, the characters, but never history. So Ramayana and Mahabharata, I will consider as two great epics, which as a student of literature, we read as part of literature. So not a history.
Further ask, प्राचीन काल में दलित एवं आदिवासी समुदाय के लोगों के लिए शिक्षा वर्जित थी, लेकिन प्रेमचंद रचित गोदान में एक प्रसंग आता है जब एक आदिवासी लड़की डॉक्टर मालती के सरदर्द को दूर करने के लिए जंगल से जड़ी बूटियों से दवा बनाकर लाती है, लेकिन डॉक्टर मालती उसे स्वीकार नहीं करती। आदिवासियों के पास लिपि ज्ञान या शास्त्र ज्ञान भले ही ना हो, लेकिन शिकार करने का ज्ञान, जंगल की जड़ी बूटियों आदि की जानकारी बहुत अच्छी है, लेकिन तथाकथित मुख्य समाज द्वारा उसे उपेक्षा की दृष्टि से देखा जाता है। क्या शिक्षा का अर्थ केवल किताबी ज्ञान है? क्या व्यावहारिक जानकारियों को महत्व नहीं दिया जाना चाहिए?
नहीं, तो बहुत अच्छा ये ऑब्जर्वेशन है जो भी है, मीनिंग आई डोंट नो हु हैज रिटन दिस. I fully agree with the observation because I also remember Premchand's Godan, whereby Malti is considered to be potted plant, artificial, that Malti, Dr. Malti, because she is basically a professional doctor, and that's why Dr. Malti. This is the irony. साहित्य में हम irony बोलते हैं. I don't know irony का हिंदी वर्ड क्या होता है, मुझे पता नहीं है, बट आपके साथ मैं बहुमत, मीनिंग सहमत, नॉट बहुमत बट सहमत हूँ कि मालती को प्रेमचंद ने potted plant is, that never natural, never flamboyant, no, it is confined to a pot. So the beauty, whatever, that may be, is confined. ये बोलते हैं. But as you very rightly said, जो tribal women का character है, when Mehta and Dr. Malti, they go for picnic and they encounter the tribal girl. मैं आपको थोड़ा अच्छा, विडम्बना शब्द है, आयरनी का विडम्बना. अच्छा, तो मैं आपको थोड़ा आपको रिमाइंड करना चाहता हूँ. प्रेमचंद ने बहुत ज्यादा ट्राइबल वुमेन का बॉडी बारे में डिस्क्राइब किए हैं, which I call romanticization. Tribal women body is being considered as over sexual body. उनका बॉडी को लिखा हुआ है कि that she her body is like a sports that woman, क्योंकि that very strongly built body है. तो प्रेमचंद प्रोग्रेसिव होने के नाते बहुत सारे इंडियन प्रोग्रेसिव राइटर ऐसा कर रहे हैं, ऐसा प्रेमचंद नहीं है, जैसा मुल्कराज आनंद है, अनंत मूर्ति है. मैं आई कैन गिव यू 10 or 12 that names of all progressive writer, including ये जो शिवशंकर पिल्लाई है, and many others, that अनंत मूर्ति है. सारे क्या करते हैं, दलित एंड ट्राइबल वुमेन को रोमांटिसाइज करते हैं. तो ये थोड़ा आप जाके फिर पढ़िए, बिकॉज द ट्राइबल गर्ल हैड प्रैक्टिकल नॉलेज, एज यू वेरी राइटली से. तो ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज को इंडियन सोसाइटी ने कभी अगर अपर कास्ट से आता है तो मानते हैं, लोअर कास्ट से आता है, ट्राइबल से आता है तो नहीं मानते हैं, बिकॉज they look that tribal and dalit as untouchable. इसीलिए मैं आपको जस्ट एक इंफॉर्मेशन देके बंद करूंगा मेरा आंसर. एक आयोती थास हैं, मैं नाम लेने के लिए भूल गया है, तमिलनाडु का है, आयोती थास. तमिलनाडु का, he was the first person to get converted into Buddhism much before Ambedkar. and उनका जो जड़ी बूटियों का that he tried to recover जो ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिनल नॉलेज है उनको बुद्धिस्ट टाइम से एक्चुअली that बुद्धिस्ट टाइम से ये ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिनल प्रैक्टिस जो था उसको फिर रिवाइव किए हैं आयोथिथास उनका 2 किताब हैं राइटिंग्स इन तमिल अभी अंग्रेजी में उपलब्ध है तो आप अगर पढ़ेंगे तो ये जो मालती का रेफरेंस जो दे रहे हैं ट्राइबल वुमेन का आप सही मानेंगे कि ट्राइबल कम्युनिटी में जो ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिनल नॉलेज था दैट इज टू बी एक्चुअली that honor and maybe that we must salute them. So Hanuman is one example. Ramayana ka Hanuman, of course that he brings the entire that right. So because he would not identify which one is that useful for Lakshman's that recovery, but that is another example whereby that you can say that ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिनल प्रैक्टिसेस ट्राइबल्स दलित कम्युनिटी में बहुत पहले ही था.
Thank you for such valuable reads also, sir. You have recommended so many interesting books and we would like to take them up.
Okay.
सर ये 2-3 और क्वेश्चंस हैं which I would like to take up. सतीश सालवी पूछ रहे हैं सावित्रीबाई फुले, महात्मा फुले तथा बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर, महात्मा गांधी जी इनके शैक्षणिक और सामाजिक योगदान बहुत रहे हैं, फिर भी आज के वर्तमान युग में लोग इनको उनके योगदान को भूलते जा रहे हैं, अपने अपने वर्ग में इनके विचारों को बांटा जा रहा है.
तो उसके बारे में तो कुछ बोलना नहीं है, पीपल भूल जाते हैं तो वी हैव टू रिमाइंड देम वंस एंड अगेन. A lecture like this that is meant for reminding people that we must try to remember their contribution. Yeah.
Shivani Phukan says such a comprehensive talk, sir. My question is, we see students from an underprivileged background, especially struggling with studying English, honor students as well as pass course students. How can we help them?
Yeah, we have to help Shivani, that say, I don't know, Shivani belongs to Delhi University or outside. Shivani Phukan is from Delhi? I don't
remedial courses, actually. We have been teaching those classes, yes.
Yeah. So remedial classes, that we have to teach. But, that remedial classes are being stopped now because UGC is not funding anymore. So what is very important for all of us, that whenever we find time, meaning it should be a commitment rather, that it is not just finding time, because I have already emphasized, that the first generation or second generation learners would definitely find difficulty to cope that coming to say Delhi University and outside, of course. Say, we have several cases, one in Miranda, another in Hindu, even, that going to the level of committing suicide. Say they take English honors, hoping that, that by doing English honors, they would get a good degree and finally get a job. But then, that either the teachers, they try to discriminate, or they don't bother to actually, that see that they grow. So whatever dreams and aspirations they have, that becomes, that difficult for them to, that. So they finally compromise. So if we try doing some remedial, I'm sure, that some of us, we are always doing, that I always take students from, that say it is either for MPhil or PhD or, that MA, I try to help as much as I can. I must tell you that, I always be, meaning the student they come, that whoever, I have to help them. And that is, I always consider it my duty. If I can, then I'm there to help. So I know also that in several Delhi University colleges, there are teachers who are doing voluntary work by helping students. So we must try to, that take a kind of, that call, thinking that this is also our duty. Otherwise, that they would definitely find difficulty.
So related to this is my like experience, which I would like to share with you, that we have been promoting digital platforms for several reasons, and in many cases, many situations, they are quite empowering also. Sharing information has become easy, and we can help students who are sitting in Ladakh and Manipur, Imphal, Meghal, and so on and so forth. But the thing is that, in cases of, that there are different kinds of marginalities, there are multiple marginalities. So there is financial marginality, and there is also gender specific marginality. And we see that, a section of student, basically, because of certain biases, because of certain deprivations, they are not able to, feel comfortable on this digital platform. So what can we do to make online and remote learning equitable as instructors?
Yeah, that that whether we are able to contribute financially, that is, that individual, that matters. But what suppose say we have been trying to, we have requested the authorities, particularly, that say we have appealed to Vice Chancellor, that like earlier FIUP time, that the previous FIUP, several laptops were being distributed. Because the first thing is that there should be at least, a provision for either laptop or maybe, that mobile with, of course, the facility of internet, etc., etc. So that is one thing we are trying to do, help getting certain facilities, so that even if it is online learning, there should be at least some facility, that available. But the larger thing is, that say whether they have internet system, no, that is what we internet system, whether there is a possibility of getting connected, wherever, because there are also isolated pockets I'm talking about. So one thing is that, say in your college, I will request Professor Gyantosh Shah, whether there is possibility of helping the poor student, because we have also, that some earlier there was a provision of poor boys poem. झा जी ये करा सकते हैं थोड़ा?
I think हमारे कॉलेज में सर नोटिस लगा है, हमारे कॉलेज में नोटिस लगा।
क्या 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 सर क्या कराना चाहते हैं?
थोड़ा मदद कराना चाहते हैं, जो जितना स्टूडेंट का अगर कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, जैसे लैपटॉप नहीं है और
बिल्कुल हम तो कर रहे हैं।
अच्छा जी,
हम कर रहे हैं।
बहुत अच्छा, ये रियली अप्रिशिएट। हम वाइस चांसलर को हमने रिक्वेस्ट किए हैं, पता नहीं वेदर देयर इज ए काइंड ऑफ दैट यूनिवर्सिटी लेवल पे जैसा पहले से FIUP टाइम में बहुत सारे लैपटॉप डिस्ट्रीब्यूट हुआ, अभी तो उनका यूज भी नहीं है और इस्तेमाल नहीं होने के कारण खराब हो पड़ा है बहुत सारे कॉलेज में। सो वी हैव रिक्वेस्टेड दैट नाउ दैट 40% ब्लेंडेड मोड है आगे, तो यूनिवर्सिटी कुछ करे, पता नहीं कुछ करेंगे या
ये कल हम लोगों के साथ मीटिंग थी प्रिंसिपल्स के साथ, हमने भी इस बात को रखी है।
अच्छा,
ये करना चाहिए। दूसरी बात है, जो FYUP के टाइम में जो लैपटॉप आया था, हम उसको भी यूज कर रहे हैं, और सब जो खराब थे ठीक करा करके जिन बच्चों को या टीचर्स को जरूरत होती है हम प्रोवाइड करते हैं।
बहुत अच्छा, अप्रिशिएबल है।
थैंक यू सर।
या
Notice has been put up in on our college website, so all the needy students and faculty, they can access those laptops. That is very much there.
Okay.
So yeah, sir, we can take up one more question. There is Mr. Bhuvnesh Sharma, who's saying, why now people think that they are becoming more literate while communicating with others, but in reality they are just posing themselves. Is it necessary, or we should express with our righteous thoughts?
Acha. Okay, so that so I can understand the question, that being literate doesn't mean, that educated. So education, we have already emphasized, that it has larger, the value. Uska jo idealism and kind of, that say we expect that education would finally not only bring emancipation, but also solidarity, in society, peace, and that communal harmony. ये जो सारे चीज है, it is only through education possible, because that if we don't that if we have education, definitely there will be some prejudice in mind. So education also makes it very clear about that a kind of moral responsibility, how to bring that different that constituency to at par with each other, so that peace and amity, that these are also a lasting impression that education can make. So yeah, I agree with that the statement that being educated, being literate is not necessarily educated. Education has a long lasting value, and we must cherish. So final goal of education is to not only that uphold certain that moral characteristic, also that to see that everybody live in that peace and that solidarity. Yeah.
Sir, our participants are thanking you profusely for the information that you have shared and the various examples that you have brought to the discussion.
Okay.
And I think you have talked about the various problems, issues, threats that are there before the education fraternity. And you have also suggested the measure. The way you said that we need to bring in the value-based education back to enhance the education standards. So that is the way. I mean, humanizing or bringing human element into what we do, what we think, how we conduct ourselves. That is the remedy, or you can say panacea, to save the society from going down. And you very clearly brought out the various threats that are there before teaching community, as they are also depreciating and not reading enough, and they are not informed enough, and self-consciousness, self-awareness is the key. And it is very important that the society understand the the need for bringing everyone on the same platform, and the inclusivity or the equity and incorporation, accommodation of everyone's interest is the need of the hour. And with this, sir, I thank you again for the vast knowledge that you have shared with us, and for endowing our participants with such wonderful ideas. And on behalf of the ARST family and Ramanujan College Teaching Learning Center, I would like to express my gratitude for your time and your involvement with the refresher course team, for raising such pertinent ideas throughout your session. And my sincere appreciation also goes to our Honorable Principal Professor Gyantosh Kumar Jhaji for creating this kind of an environment in which we can openly dialogue and deliberate and send forth important messages. And I'm grateful to College of Fresher Course Committee Convener, Vinita Tuli, for all the support that she's provided to us for learning, and my colleagues for their enthusiasm, and to our special participants for their patience, for their eagerness to learn, and for their prompt responses. I wish everyone a wonderful day ahead. And this is Shubha Divedu signing off for the day. And we are all going to meet tomorrow at 11:30 for the next day's session. Until then, stay safe and stay curious. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed. So thank you all. Take care. Bye.